record. Um, all right. So, Dan, what you missed is we were talking about V for Vendetta and how Vanessa's going to watch it tonight. All right. Looking at the agenda for today, first off, I'm in a co-working space, so I'm kind of whispering. Sorry if I'm too quiet. I promise I won't yell suddenly. So if you need to turn volume up, you'll be safe. Um, So looking at the roadmap review, so we talked last time that we were going to start looking at some priority groups for rolling out dark mode. We've nailed down what those groups are, and I've reached out to all of them in this epic to start conversations. The knowledge group did an awesome job. They jumped straight in. They built an epic to capture all the work. They got all the designers on board. Cool, great, wonderful. They're doing a fantastic job. Um, Talking with group source code to try to figure that out, figure out if they've got capacity to support or work with us. And then pipeline execution, I need to ping again because I haven't heard back from them just yet. So hopefully the next milestone, design side, will be able to start working with them to understand kind of what their pages look like in dark mode, what issues that we have, and then we'll capture all of the findings and issues so that we can put them into RQ to help fix them. Most of the work that the design side will be doing will be like understanding semantics. So like, hey, here's this element that doesn't really line up to our design vision. Like, what was the intent of it? How can we map it back? And then looking for areas where our design vision just doesn't work, and trying to understand, okay, do we need to have them change the feature to accommodate the vision, or do we need to change the vision to accommodate the feature? So there'll be some kind of back and forth on the design side there. But again, the goal is to create like an engineering backlog that we can take and start to fix either as like, foundational fixes, either in pajamas or in kind of the shared aspects of the GitLab CSS. Um, and we would work with their team to kind of like validate, and if they've got some front end spare cycles to maybe help us fix some stuff, ultimately to like get the whole system in a better state, and possibly create some docs so that the following teams have an easier time doing this sort of stuff. Because I don't anticipate working one-on-one with every single stage group to make sure that all of their pages are perfect. Like at some point we got to draw a line.
I wonder if that's like a sell for the, because I noticed there's some people haven't replied. Like, hey, we want to do this with you now. If we don't do it with you now, you're probably going to be on your own later. So,
Yeah. Do you want the
like,
carrot or the
jo
stick?
join us now. This is a benefit, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. It sounds like we'll get source code on board. And then I've just got to reach out to folks on pipeline execution again. I saw that Sasha actually may have done some work with them already on dark mode stuff. So I don't know where that is or what areas were or were not covered. So I'll have to loop them into the conversation again to make sure we've got everything in one place. If you have any questions or any thoughts about it, feel free to hop in the Epic, join the discussion there. Um, and from there, we start looking at active projects. So Dan, I see you're typing. I was going to ask you onto the design tokens things, how things are looking. Oh, sure, you're welcome.
So yeah, things are looking good. We are going to after some experimentation at the middle of last week and at the start of this week, just to check what exactly is going to happen. The plan is to turn on dark mode in the UI kit. So that's the component library we distribute in Figma and the design tokens that designers can use directly in Figma, these two separate libraries, the end of this week. It all looks like it's going to work technically.
The
um,
best kind of working.
yeah, but uh, only technically. So not, I don't think we're going to make much noise about it. We like might not even announce it at all because the using it aspects um, doesn't exist. There's no supporting materials for it. Um, but that's not to take away from this is a huge milestone for the Figma part of our work. Um, and having designers and engineers have the same language when they're working on stuff, and designers having the tools to work with dark mode in their Figma files.
That's awesome. So you mentioned we need some docs. Do you already know what needs documenting, or is this a we need to learn and then document it?
I've got a good sense of what needs documenting, but I don't have a good sense of what the contents of it will be. Like I could probably spin up the titles for the documentation pretty quickly, but what we're actually going to give as the answers for all of these titles and sections,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay. And where will these docs live? Is this something that goes into the pajamas docs, or is this a separate thing? Okay.
I don't know. I've got your headings. That's about it.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know if Jeremy's in listening mode or talking mode, but Jeremy might also have some ideas.
I might, but let's start with your headaches. So,
Aye.
All right, well, I'll at least open an issue, and Dan, you can write your headings down in there, and then we can look to figure out like how do we answer them? Where do they go? I imagine once we get the answers, it'll be a little bit more clear on like, oh, this belongs in, contribution guides versus pajamas versus whatever.
Yeah, and I'm sure the designers we work with in the next couple of milestones will be a great help in us identifying what kind of questions people ask as well.
Yeah.
And
We're gonna
even
learn a
have
lot from this.
ideas. Yeah, even have ideas of how they want to work in Figma. The kind of work that our team does in Figma is really different to how other teams work in
For
Figma.
sure.
So
For sure.
yeah, we can lean on them a lot. The next one I've got is Papercut's been great alpha testers for implementing design tokens in the product, and running into a bunch of stuff that the whole org is going to bump into when they start using it for real, and helping us identify things that need answers. I was just asking the question, how can we best triage and track the questions that come up and some of the recommended implementation approaches? And this directly relates to the ping I sent out a couple of hours ago in the semantic override kind of space. But if you'd like to pin that and come back to it at the end to give us time to go through all the other stuff, then I'm happy with that as well.
Just
I've
quickly,
got a specific discussion note on that topic.
Oh, if I scroll down, I can see it. Cool. Let's
That needs some
move.
time.
Yeah, move. My vote would be move on.
Excellent.
Okay.
Okay, then from my side, I am replacing the Bootstrap CSS usual classes, which we still have in Bootstrap View. The rest of GitLab UI is already replaced. For example, there's still some text muted inside, which is now GL text subtle, etc. I also am making sure that if we already overrode it in our custom CSS to clean that up again, which in the end has a goal to just reduce CSS in general. And this week I'm also working on this issue since now Bootstrap CSS is vendored, to get an overview about the, for example, reboot file where Bootstrap CSS is presetting the colors. I would rather first like to do a full research to understand where we do what, and also to see, do we already override it somewhere? Do we not override it yet because it has no effect yet, etc. Write everything down and then clean it up in one clean merge request or so.
Very cool. That'll be super useful. Slowly removing Bootstrap, like one tiny MR at a time. Awesome. Anything else to hit on the design token side of things?
No, just the dark mode discussion, which we have.
Yeah.
below.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Jeremy, how's dark mode looking?
Yeah, it's I don't think looks are so much the problem as other things we're running into. And I wouldn't even call it a problem. We had a good conversation in our design sync a bit ago, but yeah, I'm picking back up with design tokens at GitLab UI to align with design direction, and some of that is on the fly, and we discussed that elsewhere. But it is sparking some good conversations about just using tokens, and design exploration needs to account for in situ outcomes. Like we have a few. Uh, one of the I guess I'll go lightly on the topic, but it's an example like an alert in a modal. Well, they both use the same background color, but really an alert shouldn't probably be in a modal. So we're just, because our process is to introduce tokens and whatnot in alpha, we're triaging things on the fly and being more reactionary rather than doing more design exploration for where components would sit in situ, and how they'd react to other components, and nesting and whatnot. Alert within a section was an example, like other things like that. So we're I guess the best way that I'm thinking about it is we're and I don't like to use the term iteration here, but that's what it is, right? We're taking a look at where we're at and then continuing to progress it. So as we work on finishing out the rest of the components, kind of the same thing. Why are we applying these tokens in this way? Would this be better? Just having some of those good conversations. And I think that also dovetails into, your open issue at the bottom of just how we're at the point where we need some documentation to align on how we're applying these things and how to handle what to do when they don't quite work, when they're
For sure.
90%, but not 100%. So it's all good stuff. I'm
For sure.
forward to some of the heavy lifting here. So
Awesome. Yeah, and I did just open up the Q4 OKRs this morning. We've got one specifically about getting the dark mode applied to all the pajamas components. We got like 70% of it in Q3, which is awesome. So we've only got a little bit left to go. But I imagine now we have the ones that are like sticky. So we'll continue unpacking the weird questions throughout the quarter.
yeah, and maybe it'd be a good place to ask, but design direction wise, I feel like we know that this is not where we'd like the UI to be in a year. So what I mean by that is we haven't had a lot of runway to go through and really look at everything holistically.
Mhm.
So I'm viewing this as kind of a V1 of where we're headed directionally. Does that
Yeah.
align with your expectations too? So if we say, oh, we're 100% complete with tokenization for these components of dark mode, it's not that we're design complete, it's just that we're token complete. And
I mean, I'm saying complete in terms of like implementing the design vision that you and Sasha shared with Angela a few months back. Certainly we can continue iterating on them, especially, and I imagine we will as we introduce like new themes, high contrasts, like maybe colorblind friendly themes. But I see a lot of this as like foundational work so that we have the flexibility to do that without having to go back and touch every single line of CSS all over again.
yep. Okay, yeah, I'd say we're aligned.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
Cool. Awesome. All right, James, how's burning through GitLab CSS going?
It's going. Yeah, focusing on the text migrations. So we did a test of 10 migrations from secondary to subtle. There were some interesting learnings in there. One super useful thing is a lot of them, a few of them already had storybook entries, so it made it a lot easier to validate. If you look at that merge request, you can see like, yeah, out of the 10 we migrated, 7 of them had storybooks, so you can just click on the link and that's the entire validation process. So that was cool. Yeah, and then what we found was we're using it a lot for icons. So we're using like GL text color to color an icon, which does work, but it's not how we should be doing it. So I migrated. I'm halfway. Well, I migrated one, but it just it just spiraled a little bit because if we're so yeah if we're migrating the text color, um one of them was using secondary where I think it should have been using disabled, but it isn't. And then also some I noticed some props were broken in it. Anyway, you can see the merge request, it got a little bit big, but I did learn a lot about how icons work. So hopefully we can do like a mass migration of the icons that are using text color and instead use variants, I hope. Um, I've been creating storybook entries for the for text colors that use disabled, so we can test them. And I spun out. I've been working over the last few months on this storybook template generator, and I separated it to a different project, so it's a lot easier to generate storybook templates. They're not very. They're like, I don't know, 80-90% is good. Yeah, I posted a video the other day. I made a storybook entry in 20 minutes. So that was cool. If we can do that, it should allow us to validate these changes a lot easier, which will make the migrations a lot safer.
Really cool. I'm gonna have to take a deeper look at that. Sounds helpful.
Yeah, I made a video last week, and then today I cleaned up the project so it's a lot more usable for other people. So yeah, I might need to do a tutorial, but yeah.
Very cool. Very cool.
On that, James, am I right in thinking this could be a good first step in introducing some visual regression tests to GitLab the product if we've got lots of parts of GitLab the product coming into a storybook instance? Does that change how easy that is?
Yeah, it should be a lot easier. Yeah, I mean, I guess so. I'm not super familiar with that bit. I've been learning bits and pieces over the last couple of months on, yeah, visual regression testing, but I don't know a lot about it. But there are, yeah, if there's more storybooks, it's going to be a lot easier, I think.
The hard thing with visual regression testing isn't adding the tests, it's keeping and maintaining the tests. So if you imagine a poorly maintained one where you go, oh, they've all failed. I'll probably change things. I'll click the button to regenerate them. Like I've seen that before, and they end up being really expensive and really not as useful as they should be, right? Like I don't want to poo-poo the idea that what a strange term. That's what came to my head though. But that's generally where I've seen them go, right? We're running into it with the Vue 3 tests in GitLab UI at the minute, where a lot of them fail, and we're like, I don't know why. They're off by like this much, not sure why. So yeah, careful on that one. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'll,
it's
I'll
true.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I've definitely found it more
a bunch
useful
of
at the
things.
individual component level rather than the full page level. Full page screenshots are just chaos. Like they change all the time for who knows why. But in Storybook, they're okay.
Yeah, I keep being like, oh yeah, we could add automated testing and it could do this or this, and then I try to do it, and then it's way harder than and it's way less useful than I thought. But the thing that really bothers me is like when you're trying to validate something and you have to turn on 3 feature flags and then 10 steps, and I'm already exhausted, particularly if I can't find where those validation steps are. So that's what this is really replacing. Which is also good because when I was deleting some of the CSS last month, and we found a few migrations that still needed to happen to pajamas components. I created issues for community to work on, and the biggest question that keeps coming back is, how do I render this component? And my answer is like, that's why I didn't do it. So good luck. But hopefully now I can point them to this project and be like, try and make a storybook entry. Maybe it'll be easy. Maybe not.
That's awesome. Yeah, I appreciate your perspective on all the community stuff, James. That's very helpful. All right. Anything else to talk about on CSS fixes?
Nothing to
Okay.
talk about, but I know Scott's working through some as well. I saw some MRs he's added. We're replacing
Okay.
grayish blue, which of course that's a variable we have with a
Nice.
different one, right? There's a few others. I won't talk
Awesome.
to them, so I don't know too much about them, but I know it's stuff Scott's working through as well.
Yeah, very cool. All right, let's jump into the main event then. So we got this discussion that Dan has been driving around like how do we standardize the use of semantics? Or maybe Dan, you can talk to it better than I can.
Yeah, I think there's two questions here that are a little bit intertwined and get a little bit tangled. One is the use of the Tailwind dark selector, so dark colon da, 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 da. I don't really want to talk about that. But what I would like to talk about is the other conversation which is in on this is where we say where we might want to go are in light mode, or I've seen people who've said, oh, in light mode, I want it to be feedback color warning, which is a semantic thing. But in dark mode, I want it to be background color subtle, which is a different semantic thing. So it's this idea of in one mode, it has one set of semantics, and in another mode, it has another set of semantics. Is there a decision on how we want people to implement that? Because there's a couple of different ideas in that issue, and I've had people point to different comments to say, here's why I'm doing this because of what was said in this comment, or here's why I'm doing this because of what was said in that comment. So yeah, that's the question.
Hang on, how do I word this, right? Like, in is there a valid reason why we would do that? Because just because the mode has changed, the semantics don't change. Like, is it just to match what the design is currently, or is it deeper than that?
I think there are probably two philosophies getting tangled as well. I think sometimes there's the hey in light mode, I want to pin this color to what we use as the warning color. And in dark mode, I want to pin this color to what we use for this. So it isn't actually the semantic is these things. I just want to keep these colors in sync. And the other use, and perhaps the more problematic one, is hey, this is the semantics, but I don't like how it looks in dark mode, so I want to override it. So I want to keep what the design system offers for one mode and do my own thing in another mode. And how can we support teams having that control over their areas of the product while still keeping the system itself robust and allow us to make changes at a system level and have confidence that it's not going to be unstable for our consumers.
Did we have a real use case yet where people said the second case? Like, I like the color in light mode, but not in dark mode, so I changed the design token?
Yes. Yeah, I'd say like isn't quite the right word, but I think it's most close to that. Is
And
the
that's probably, would you say estimate 40 to 50% of the circumstances, Dan, we're running into that? So it's not uncommon.
yeah, not uncommon.
I'm personally guilty of it just because of it's easy to twist semantics as well. Like that's part of one of the, part of that conversation that we have to figure out. How do we nail down semantics, and can semantics change per mode? Probably shouldn't, but you can argue your way into it. It's probably not the most helpful though, and it's not going to make it operate as a system like we want, especially when we get into other modes. That's where this becomes problematic. Like if we're just talking about two things, I think we could get a passing grade. But when we think about semantics applying uh, to high contrast mode or whatever else, a dimmed mode, these types of changes are not sustainable. So we have to figure out how to adapt, and then at the same time how to align design direction and capture design direction in a semantic way, I think is part of it. And there's going to be some trade-offs, I think. So at least in the interim, at least initially.
Okay.
Could we do it in a similar way to how we do lint in that, like, yes, you can do whatever you want, but you have to explicitly like turn this off to do it the wrong way so that we can get a reason for it. And I'm struggling to word this, but like so that we can move forward with doing the current designs the way they are, but also having like points that we can look at for, right, here's a discussion we need to have on why are you doing I don't know, subtle on one and error on the other. Like, because like if we do add a new mode or change mode, which is things that we are going to do, we can potentially break things in ways we don't expect, right? Like that's kind of the point. I don't know if I
What is it
said
that we would
anything
actually lint
coherent
on
at
though?
all there.
I definitely understand the concept. It's right, like specifically looking for we're changing semantics in dark mode. But what would you actually lint on?
I
Like, is it
don't
the
think you
use of
could.
the GL dark
Yeah, I
selector
don't
in
I don't think
CSS or
Yeah,
in
I
fact,
had a
yeah,
very similar idea and rather harder. So this is why I ask if you have already examples. So instead of
hmm
just linting, but rather forbid it completely to detect in
hmm
the code if we have GL contextual class and then also a dark colon contextual class. Maybe a bit more complicated if you do it in CSS with .gl dark, but really to throw an ESLint would be ESLint, but to throw an error to say this is not possible.
Interesting.
Technically, it would somehow work.
Yeah.
there'll still be ways around the linting if you really
Yeah.
want to. But if we give people an easy route and then lint on that to say like, hey, by the way, you're doing this incorrectly, but then still allow it, people don't go around it as much. But then we have a way to sort of search for where that rule has been disabled and go, right, here's an area where we need to look at this and figure it out from there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's some rules that don't apply like a one size fits all. And we might start with some of our more strict use cases. So, for example, if you're using, you know, uh, action tokens, well, those you're using an action text token. It also expects a border and a background. Like we could lint against those. But it gets a little more fluid if you're talking about just general UI, where it's like, well, this is a section background, but it's using a default border. Like, how do we, in code, it's like, well, should those be paired? I don't know. We need to take a look at the actual circumstance and decide how it's being used and that's where it gets into like the intention. Like, well, my intent is to make this a section, but I want the border to stand out more, so I don't use the section border. That's where like intent starts to fall apart on different things, and so it gets hard to create rules against that. But I do think there are some sets that we could reliably apply linting against, where it's like, hey, we're expecting this to be here, and that gets more into like when you're working with components versus just general UI. And I suspect we'll get more into this as we start working with those different stage groups and the different pieces in the UI that we're having to accommodate. I think we'll start to see how we can fashion better rules and maybe come up with some good linting sets.
That makes sense. So I know we're a little past time here, so I want to make sure to capture some next steps. So one, we should document, thank you, Jeremy. We need to document our agreement here, right? About like, we're not encouraging folks to change semantics between modes. Maybe put that in our pajamas docs about how to use design tokens. And then we need a new issue for adding some linting rules to try to put some teeth behind the guidance. So I think we've got an issue for the first one about, let's discuss it in that issue, Dan, and then we can just turn those into MR in pajamas to capture that upload. And then I'll build out a new issue. Maybe we could get a milestone about adding some new linting rules.
I think there's a third part there as well, which may have been Dan's original question, is like we should have a place where as we come across these things, we can add it to I don't know, whatever it is, a document, a spreadsheet, a issue, whatever, to say this part of the code base has one of these examples in it. We should go back to that at some point and revisit it, right?
Yeah.
Just so that we can almost fire and forget and not fire and forget, fire and remember later.
Awesome.
To unblock Sasha's MRs that are in progress, do we have a recommended approach out of these three that I've put up here that I think people can do, whether it's through Tailwind or GLDark in the CSS? Is there one that engineering says, hey, this is how we want you to do this?
And from engineering point of view, it does not matter. I think B makes the most sense, but I know that we also had the discussions if we even want to continue using classes like Orange 200, Neutral 800, or only feedback action.
Yeah. But we definitely don't want A, and we definitely don't want B.
I don't want A and C.
A and C, yeah, that's what I mean. Can we write that in the issue then so I can point people towards it when it comes up in the MR reviews? Thank you. And not me, because I'm not engineering. I'm just a scribbler.
Sam, can I volunteer you to follow up on the issue?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
I'll add it to do now.
Thank you. All right. I appreciate
I think
your
in
time
general,
today.
this is
Go ahead,
getting
Vanessa.
so error prone because of what Peter has written. Like that neutral 800 might be this one in light mode, but that one in dark mode. And if you have dark mode and that's
Yeah, I'm hoping we can get rid of all of the color flipping stuff once we've got everything tokenized. That's just chaos.
I mean, even if we have like another layer where this is I don't even know what this thing is, but like I'm gonna call it the magic button. And magic button in dark mode is orange, and in light mode it's blue. Like whatever, I'm making it all up, but you get the point, right? Like adding that layer of semantics can maybe help there.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for your time today, everybody. Make sure to follow up on the issue with these couple of things that we can move this forward, because the fewer of these that we introduce before we make more migrations, the better. Awesome. Take care, all. I'll see you later.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.